Yes, it's possible to make money selling ads on your podcast. But before you ask how much, you should really be asking how much time, and is it worth it? Here's a real-world story that's, well, depressing. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Let's get real for a moment, because I am about to relate a 100% true story that I'm not just relating a story, I've actually lived this story like yesterday, and the months leading up to this lived the story. Also, if you're a podcaster who's making bank on advertising because you literally get millions of downloads, then you can probably skip this episode. For the rest of us out there who have yet to reach the magical millions of downloads or even 50,000 downloads where this starts to get interesting, I thought I would talk through the real world life of getting podcast sponsors for real, yo. So here's how this happened, and this is a true story. I'm modifying some of the numbers slightly, just rounding up, just in the event somebody comes back and does some math checking. Math's right, but I did round up a bit. Anyhow, we're doing that. Here's the deal. An ad rep firm I reached out to, well, I guess in the middle of this, I have a connection of mine who gets a lot of downloads on his shows. Not 50,000, certainly not 1 million downloads, but thousands of downloads, and I'll give you the exact number in just a moment. He gets thousands of downloads to the point to where it's like, well, okay. He's over that threshold, 5,000, which we are told about in the podcasting space, per episode. That's episode downloads after 30 days. He's over that 5,000 mark, and so I reached out to an ad rep firm. And they said, sure, it's a little small for us, but we've got other shows that are similar to this, so yeah, let's take them on. And so that was back in February, March. That's how that's been. So since that time, the ad firm has been sending me potential deals, usually at least a couple of times a month, if not a couple of times a week. Here's an advertiser. This is what they advertise. This is what they want. This is what they sell. They're looking for shows that do this. Do you think that your show is a good fit? My job is to go vet that and say, does this fit? Knowing what I know about the show and the host, would they do this? And so the vast majority of them I have said yes to. A handful I have said no to. But also, of the vast majority that I have said yes to, I never hear back. I never hear back whether or not the deal is going through or not, which means it's not. And of course, from the agency side, the ad rep side, they really can't follow up on everything they're doing. I mean, it's a process, right? So they know it's a hole, but they're not really an easy way to fix it. So what I know is out of the 35 deals that I've said yes to, one has gone through. One has gone through. One has gone through. I said, that's great. Got the offer from the agency, went back to the host. There was probably 5 days of back and forth of understanding how do we get the product and do we test it and then what are we looking for and here and there. And so they finally said, yes, let's do it. Agency then generates the insertion order, which has the details of how long it should be, any key points we're supposed to hit, URLs to mention, codes to give, all of that stuff. Give that in an IO. That comes to me. I then take that IO and give it over to the host and say, do this. This is what you're supposed to do. You got the product, right? Great. Okay. Do this. And the host does that. A week later, there's an availability for them to do a show, an episode, runs the spot. Great. He then gives me the URL. Supposed to let me know. I had to go look for it on my own, but that's okay. I can do that. I then have to go to the ad rep firm and give them not only the URL of the actual media file, easy peasy, but also the timestamp where the drop occurred. They don't want to listen to a 45-minute file or even a 10-minute file to find it. You got to tell them this is the timestamp where it actually occurred. They then supply that to the advertiser as well as check themselves to make sure that it followed the rules. And in this case, it might not have. No, let's be real, it didn't. Twice we screwed it up. Wrong timing, wrong place we dropped the episode for problem number one. And then problem number two, one of the key things I wanted us to mention, we forgot to mention. And I'm saying we, I mean the host forgot to mention. And we didn't catch it, and so we had to do it again. So it took 3 times. It took 3 times before they finally said, yeah, that's great. And for that final time they said, yeah, that's great, they issue payment. And it takes 30 days. From the time they verify things, yeah, great. They're on a net 30 clock. So sometime between yesterday, when everything was nice and approved, and 30 days from now, I will get paid. Now, there was a lot of work in there. In case you missed the work that went on in there, I probably invested, I'm going to say, so far, 12 hours. 12 hours of my time in doing all the things that we have just mentioned thus far. That's just me. That's just me, the guy who's playing middleman number 2 in the middle of this. 12 hours. The hosts themselves that did this, oh man, they had to grab the product and try the product and test it and come up with script and whatever. I'm going to say they probably have probably a little less than the time that I have, because part of mine was fielding all the offers that didn't actually work. So I'm going to say, let's say they've got 4 hours into the process. 4 hours into the process. I've got 12 hours into the process. And who knows how much time the ad rep firm has into the process. So how much money do we get from all this? How much money did we make? Now, the offer for this ad, which was a single ad drop, one ad to be ran as a test, one ad to be ran for $250. That's a lot of money for a lot of people. That's going to cover your hosting expenses easily, right? Might even cover some of your production costs and some of your marketing. At $250 for a single output, what a deal. Now, that $250 was a figure that the ad rep company came up with. They have access, because we have to give them access, to the download numbers. They can log in and see how many downloads episodes are getting on a regular basis, so they can project how much it's going to cost. So doing the math, by the way, this particular show I'm speaking of gets around 7,000 downloads per episode. 7,000 downloads after 30 days. And so that $250 equates to a $35 CPM. Wow, that's actually a very good number. That's really, really high. I'm impressed by that. That's great. But remember, it's a fixed number. So if something happens and the podcaster decides to promote or something else happens, in that instead of 7,000, that episode gets 14,000, they're not going to get $500. They get $250. It's a projection number. And of course, as time goes on, that projection will change, but it's not done to the whims of your download counts. So, $250. But did they get $250? They did not get $250. They, the host, did not. $250 was the gross amount of the offer. The ad rep firm, they take 30%. Wouldn't have had the deal if it wasn't for them, so they take 30%, which means there's $175 net. But that $175 I get some of, because I did all the work. Remember the 12 hours I put into getting this deal and working everything through? Yeah, I get 20% of $175, which is $35. $35 for my 12 hours worth of work, and $140 to the show host. The one that had to spend their 4 hours doing things and redoing it over and over again. This is the part of the show where you say, man, that sounds like a whole lot of work for $140 or $35, or even for their ad rep firm, $75. Now, of course, the ad rep firm, they might have 100 clients, so then instead of $75, it's $7,500, and that's a much bigger deal for them. But for us, I don't know. This is a harsh lesson, he says. A harsh lesson in the realities of podcast advertising. Forget the money. Do you have the time to do all this if your show's less than 7,000? I don't know. Maybe a person in your life, a podcaster, needs to hear this harsh lesson. Why is that hard for me to say? Send them an episode. This episode, please tell them, hey, you want to think about the math, also think about the time involved. Send them this episode, plus it helps to grow the show. And since you see how tiny amount of money this advertising thing makes me, I don't do a lot of advertising repping, but I do. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/evoterra and support the show and the efforts that I do bringing this kind of content to you on a regular basis. That's it. Enjoy the rest of your day. I shall be back tomorrow with yet another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers.